Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Xaereth Prevails, an alternate accounts story. I am covering Championship 4 matches 10 through 12, which is the last week. All of my opponents are all in Erodium at this point, and I'm showing you my stats from right now, the time that I actually am recording this, and so my GP is considerably less. I have fewer Gear 13s and Gear 12s and everything, and this is the best I could do in terms of stats. So my apologies, it's not really up to date, but that's how it is. Currently, my alt has been 9-0, and I was hoping to go a perfect 12-0, which is actually a lot harder in this round than you might think. When I marched into this round, my opponent had already attacked. They'd taken out my front two zones, so we can see my defenses here. They took 3 against my Palpatine Badstilla squad, and my Newt squad posed no problem. And then Cad Bane, of all teams, took 3 battles. Kira Nest took 2. And then in the back there, my Geonosians took 2, Rex took 2, and then they couldn't get through my Ewoks or Hera at that point. And then they failed an attack on my Negotiator, which is pretty understandable in Division 5. So I thought I had a lot of wiggle room here, and the goal here is just to full clear. Of course, we want to get into Kyber as quickly as possible, and even though Kyber at this point is kind of a foregone conclusion for this account, we want to see how deep we can get. Like if I could get top 100, top 50, something like that, that would be wonderful. So the first match here, they do have Geonosians, and actually decently modded, or rather geared Geonosians, and so that's not a team you want to mess around with. And luckily, I have all my best droids on defense, but General Grievous is Relic 3, which is pretty good for Division 5, and my Magna Guard is at this point I think just Gear 11, but that's decent. And he's just there alongside some random Geonosian just to die and charge his ultimate ability, or that's how I think of it. You use his unique Zeta and it recharges his cooldowns, and General Grievous is a huge mismatch against bugs, and generally you don't want to have to waste him on that. But in Division 5 people have bugs, and you have a limited number of teams that can actually deal with them. You have a limited number of teams that can deal with Geonosians in Division 1 for that matter. So good to be able to get that out of the way. And then this other team here, Bosk Bounty Hunters against Padme, at the really high relic levels, like this team can really give you a lot of problems if you're Padme, just because Boba can do huge damage against Padme, with his execute and all of his various abilities. But at lower gear levels, he just really doesn't have enough hitting power to be able to do that. So Padme, it almost seems like a waste here to try to take this team out, but I didn't want to risk trying to take like Jedi. My Jedi are considerably weaker than my Padme squad, and I just wanted to make sure that I could clear through this zone and see what was in the back zone here. It was no guarantee that my opponent was going to stay stuck against my zones. So getting to the back here, and there's really not much resistance here, like not many good teams, so that was great news. I tend to, with my alt, take like almost all just really strong offensive teams that I have available. I have a few that'll trip you up. You saw my defenses that my opponent couldn't actually get through all of them. That isn't always the case, of course, but I have enough squads that can kind of just trip people up that it's pretty solid. So one of the easiest matchups in the game in 3v3 is clones versus Commander Luke, and that's what I did. It can trip you up if you don't have the right team, of course. Luckily I did, and they didn't really put that much on defense. I didn't really know. I didn't look very closely at my opponent's roster. This round wasn't extremely hard in terms of roster strength, but I did want to make sure that I was going to one-shot all of these different teams. As I said, we're trying to maximize banners, and now we're using there's only one really strong team remaining that we need to counter, and it's First Order, and they're actually pretty well geared. However, I do have Jedi Revan here, and Jedi Revan, it really just beats almost every team in 3v3. In general, I would highly recommend, if anyone's working on, a specific meta team, I would honestly work on Jedi Revan before I would work on Darth Revan, just because you need Jedi Revan anyways to unlock Malak, and Malak is necessary. He's a necessary component for the Darth Revan team. So, if you get Darth Revan, that's great, but sometimes it just turns out that you can't actually run him that effectively because you can't have Malak. You don't have Malak, and Jedi Revan, however, doesn't need some extraneous character. Like, once you unlock Jedi Revan, sure, you do need to unlock Grandmaster Yoda, but that should be pretty simple at that point, just because of all the different characters that you've had to use to unlock Jedi Revan in the first place. And then the team is just really good, and it counters almost everything. So highly recommended. And anyways, back to this match. There isn't really that much of a challenge here. They're all gear 12. All of my guys, I think, are gear 11. Jedi Revan has 2 Zetas on him, including his leadership. So, it's not a bad squad. Jolie, of course, has his Zeta, and Grandmaster Yoda has his special Zeta. No, it's not special. Maybe it is his special. His non-leadership Zeta, we should say. Maybe it's his unique, in fact. So, they are well Zetaed. They're decently geared. They are out-geared, in fact. Although all of my opponents' First Order team is gear 12, but, we have the ability to cleanse stuns. We have the ability to, keep them from buffing themselves. We can mark past his taunt. There's just really not a challenge there. So, Jedi Revan, First Order might end up being really good in the future. We don't really necessarily know. Probably they will be, considering all the different characters that are coming out. But as of right this minute, Jedi Revan absolutely destroys them. So fleet is not necessarily much of a challenge. I actually have 2 pretty strong fleets on my alt account, and that kind of happened by accident. I was initially just I was trying to get a meta fleet for my alt account, and that was the Millennium Falcon with Home 1, so great, I have that. And it's not fully developed. You can see my reinforcements are Vader's Tie and Xanadu Blood, so not Rebels like I probably should if I really wanted to go all out on it, but I have enough Rebels there, and Millennium Falcon is pretty close to max. Han and Chewie are gear 12 and gear 13 respectively, and then I have gear 11 on the Phoenix squads that are in the Phantom, at least, and my Bosk is gear 12, so all pretty good for Division 5. And we're just trying to counter this Geonosian team, and they had some pretty strong Geonosians, and that's cool because then it also gives them an extra fleet. So kudos to my opponent for having a decent fleet there. However, Millennium Falcon does walk over that pretty easily, and you can see my opponent hadn't even fully farmed their Geonosian ships yet, so might be a challenge a little bit later down the line, but nothing too crazy. So, you can see my opponent actually had like a gear 8 Treya, which is interesting, I guess. A couple other decent teams in the back, but as I said, I've got a lot of good offensive teams. So I do have Asajj here, and she's Zetaed on her leadership, which is the one that's the most important. And then I'm taking Zombie because she's geared 10 and won't die, and Taunts, she has decent speed, and then Spirit is only gear 9, I believe, and only 5 stars, but she still hits pretty decently hard. And the thing is, if we can just keep killing, we'll keep hitting these guys. If they keep killing Zombie at some point, then, it'll actually buff Asajj over time. And really, you just wear Phoenix down. This is not the best iteration of Phoenix anyways. They had Chopper here with Zeb. I think that the best defensive iteration for Phoenix at this stage is probably Hera and Kanan and someone probably like Sabine or Ezra, honestly, just so you have a little bit of damage per second. You have a counter and you have a good taunt, and a good facilitator with Hera, but that clearly my opponent didn't do that, and they paid the price, and I don't feel guilty at all. So now I'm facing my opponent's Night Sisters, and this is a pretty huge mismatch. My opponent had okay Night Sisters, but I had really strong bounty hunters, you'll see that in the next match they do, they pull more than their weight. And, you know, against Night Sisters, it's great because I can deny their revives if I want to. With Django Unique Zeta, that's a highly recommended under the radar Zeta. With Django, he's able to just deny revives, and because Night Sisters, that's kind of the lifeblood of Night Sisters in general. Like it's just really harsh for them. They can't really cope. So, you know, easy enough here. And now we have. I was kind of debating like what team I wanted to take against this Treya team. Like it wasn't well geared, and it didn't have Zetas or anything, so I wasn't that worried. But you know, against Jedi, it seems like they would probably have some game. But with Batstila in the lead, and then, you know, Gear 11 Ezra and Gear 11 Ahsoka, like it wasn't that much of a challenge. So, you know, happy enough to get the win there. And then finally, we have I run this on my main account a lot, Kylo Ren and First Order Executioner plus Watt. And you know, the team we're facing here has a little bit of damage per second in the form of Leia here. She's stealthed and everything. She can be annoying, and then old Ben can provide a little bit of turn meter just in the form of, you know, if someone evades, then they gain turn meter, and it gives his whole team some evasion. So it's an okay timeout team, especially in Division 5. I can see how my opponent has won a lot of matches just on the strength of that sort of thing, but you know, Kylo Ren and Watt, they're all like Gear 9 or something, so not necessarily out-gearing my opponent, but like that, you'll see a little bit later, like it's a really, really strong combination. Like that's one of the strongest teams I have on my alt, to the point where I'm like, I don't know if I want to upgrade them right now and prioritize it. You know, it was just pretty strong. So I did end up beating my opponent there. They didn't attack further. I was down to rank 119, which is pretty cool. You can see the final score, and, you know, got some currency. I love that they upped the amount of currency that we can earn here. And we're on to our next one. At one point, I took a screenshot just because I was so close to getting into Kyber. I was rank 8. And then once I finally jumped over that line into Kyber, I was back to, you know, the low 100s. So my next opponent was named something I'm not going to try to pronounce. And they had a really, really, really strong Jedi Revan team, or Darth Revan team. You can see at the bottom there that they had finished top 300-ish in Kyber at one point. And they were not an opponent to mess around against. You know, and real quick, I wanted to show you guys, like, the top 4 in my group, one of them just doesn't look like they belong. So you see one of the guys has Darth Revan with Malak, and then we have another guy who has Darth Revan and Malak, and then we have another guy who has Darth Revan, and all of these guys are really strong. And then we have me, and with my really bad arena score. So it's kind of funny that I was in the running to maybe go undefeated despite those that kind of handicap. I thought it was amusing anyways. So moving into this match, my opponent had their Darth Revan with Malak on defense, and so frustrating to have to deal with that. So first I wanted to throw in a squad to burn their cooldowns, and that, you know, normally that works pretty well in, you know, with my other account, but in this case they didn't use any of their really good specials, but I decided to jump in anyways with my General Grievous squad. My goal here was just to kill at least, like, I wanted to kill HK or Darth Revan, maybe Malak if the opportunity presented itself, just because this Malak wasn't super well geared yet. But you see that they immediately just destroyed my team with, like, no repercussions at all. And now we get to a part that's a little bit frustrating for me. Now, the thing that's frustrating to me is just the fact that I can't find the video to be able to show you guys how I countered Darth Revan after that, how I, you know, was trying to be able to beat it. And thankfully we have swgoh.gg, which will show us our history at least, so, you know, I can show you guys the moves that I made at least to be able to try to take this Darth Revan team out. So you saw that my previous 2 attempts were failures, like total abject horrible. Like, I even loaded turn meter on my last one. And so I threw my Padme team in, which is all gear 12. Jedi Anakin is actually gear 13, Relic 1. And, I was hoping to kill HK and Darth Revan here, and I only ended up killing HK. And then I got slaughtered, like less than a minute, and I got taken out. The really big twist here, and I really wish I could show you guys, I do have other videos to this effect, but my Gear 12 bounty hunters managed to kill both Darth Revan and Malak. And honestly, it's a huge mismatch in some ways. The bounty hunters are healed by Darth Revan's mechanics. Every time Darth Revan hands out his various debuffs to his team, which actually buffs them, it also heals the Bosk bounty hunters. So, I did end up managing to win that. It was a very close one. You saw that Jango was the only one who left alive after that. But I did manage to do it, albeit the fact that I did sacrifice 3 of my best teams in order to be able to win that. And now I was forced to do some really tricky things, like really difficult. I didn't have much faith at all in my Jedi Revan team to be able to take out even this Padme team. Padme's only gear 8 or 9, something like that. It's not like a supercharged team, but General Kenobi is gear 12, and Anakin, if I remember correctly, isn't that weak either, but I needed to take out Padme first. Normally you don't want to target Padme, like she's usually the last one you kill, but I needed to get her Zetas out of the way so that my opponent's other characters would stop stacking their defense, or rather their stacks of protection. I needed that because otherwise the team just gets too resilient. And that's where having a low gear Padme kind of bit my opponent, because my hits were just strong enough to just basically negate any of the bonuses that she was getting, and I was able to just take her out. And Jedi Revan can beat Padme teams actually, at higher gear levels and everything, but it's a miserable experience because Jedi Revan thrives off of assists, and Padme thrives off of people assisting against her. So it can be a really long, frustrating battle, but we can overcome. So moving into this match, I didn't really have that much left. Like I had my Commander Luke team, and that was basically it in terms of like high gear teams. And my opponent had Geonosians, and I had 0 that could deal with Geonosians at this point, other than Commander Luke. Luckily, Commander Luke is up to the challenge here. You see I stunned Brood Alpha first, and then I was trying to get buff immunity on the Brute, just because then he can't taunt. I was going to dispel him with Luke, which I did, and then if I could do buff immunity on him, then he wouldn't be able to taunt, and I could just target the other Geonosians, because you run into this problem where if you kill Brute, then Brood Alpha is just going to resummon Brute, which is what happens. You kill him. However, I was able in this instance to be able to take out the side Geonosians as well, and so that didn't end up being as big of a deal as it could have been. Now, this last battle here, I mentioned my Kylo Ren with First Order Executioner and Watt, and how strong they can be, and you can see I have Gear 8 on Kylo Ren Unmasked, I have Gear 9 on First Order Executioner, and Gear 10 on Watt. And they're facing an all Gear 12 First Order team. I think maybe the officers only like Gear 11, but like grossly outgeared here. And you can see that Kylo Ren Unmasked almost died there, like came really close. However, he does have the taunting tech, and he does regenerate a lot of health and protection. Watt helps with that a lot as well. And so you can see he's already like pretty well healed. And the goal here is honestly you kill First Order officer because he's one of their First Order engines, so to speak. Like he gives them a ton of turn meter, he gives them a lot of buffs, he lets them do all of their specials a lot more often. He does a lot of really frustrating things. And so you take him out, and then for Kylo Ren Unmasked was probably my next best option. The Kylo Ren, the original one, he used to be like this character who could, solo entire teams on his own, and he still can, I guess, in some instances, but really like that hasn't been the case for a while. So you can see here with the weapons tech on First Order Executioner and the constant taunting of Kylo Ren Unmasked, I was able to beat vastly superior team there. So was really happy that that worked, because otherwise I would have just been stuck, and I would have, 100% I would have lost the match. So moving in here, I'm just doing fleet again. I was debating for a little bit whether I should do an undersize or what, and I eventually did decide to do undersize here. It is against a home one, but there's no Millennium Falcon. My opponent didn't have Millennium Falcon, or they just don't use it on this team. They wanted to use it for offense on some other team that wasn't with home one, so I didn't really get that, but that's a pretty huge break for me. Honestly, I probably could have gone a little bit more hardcore with the with my undersize, because these ships just aren't good, frankly. Like, no offense to my opponent, this isn't a great fleet for defense, but I mean, this is Division 5 too. Like, people don't necessarily always have two strong fleets. I just kind of fell into it, just because I was working on Grand Republic or Galactic Republic for a while, and decided to farm up Negotiator as well. So anyways, was able to get the 67 banner win, which is huge. It's a pretty big deal to be able to do that, and now we just need to full clear all of my opponent's squads. And I don't think I needed to be absolutely perfect here, but I needed to get creative. So, one of the really fun teams in 3v3, honestly, is Machine Gun Leia, and all of my characters here are pretty low geared. I guess 3PO is a gear 12, but Leia is only gear 8. And the whole premise is, every time under the Akbar lead, every time you use an ability that isn't an attack, then it calls someone to assist. And so half the time, if 3PO does it, then half the time it's going to be Leia. And Leia, when she's stealthed, gets to shoot 3 times, and with 3PO, every time she shoots a basic, it does an expose as well. And so really what she does is kill people through exposes. She's not doing a ton of just overt damage. She's just doing a ton via expose. So that was actually a pretty easy battle there. I was able to get the win there, and these other teams were actually kind of challenging, nothing too crazy. The Traya team was a little bit stressful because Treya's always a little bit scary, even without Zetas. And then they had a relict Sith Trooper, so it's like, am I actually going to be able to chew through all of that? They also had a reasonably well geared Night Sisters team. Now, I know that a lot of you elitists who are in Division 1, myself included, are going to say, what, this isn't good gear. Like, Talzin's only gear 8, Zombie's only gear 10, Asajj is barely any better at all. But the fact is, like, this team is really good in Division 5 because there's just not many teams that can deal with it. And so, the goal here is just to kill, you have to get 2 initial kills against Night Sisters, and they can't be zombie kills. If you kill zombie, then zombie will just revive for no charge at all. And then once you do kill 2 of them, then finally you can actually kill one for good. Now, I killed Asajj there, and it was scary because then Talzin was starting to call her up with her lead Zeta, and every time that you do a basic, then one of the dead Night Sisters comes back and punches and then dies again. So it was pretty scary. However, I did manage to get the win there, and without any major hassles. Now, this team is just a hodgepodge of just random characters who are okay geared. My R2 is gear 12, Biggs is gear 11 for ships, and then Thrawn is only gear 8. And I just took Thrawn because he's the only one with the leadership, and so he's kind of basically just buffing himself. You see, he used his Grand Admiral command ability or whatever he gets for leadership, and that was an attempt at trying to be able to regenerate protection faster. Didn't necessarily happen, but it did kill my cooldown so I could get fracture on Biggs, and got the pretty high banner win there. And then the only other team that I had that was any good really was my Bastila with Ezra and Ahsoka, and you guys saw how I did in my last match against that throwaway Traya team. This one was considerably better modded, better geared in general, and better constructed. Like Sith Trooper at Relic, whatever it is, Relic 2 or 3, is just really hard to kill. Like my main account doesn't have a Sith Trooper at that level, so the first goal, of course, is to kill Traya because she has Isolate, and Isolate will really just mess with everything you do. It's such a good ability. And then after that, you want to kill Sidious, not because he's such a huge threat, but Sith Trooper isn't much of a threat, and Sidious does do some damage, and then you just basically have to spend the rest of the match, like spend forever just trying to take Sith Empire Trooper out. And he's got so much defense, and under Traya lead, even though she wasn't Zetaed, it's still really tough to try to chew through all of this. So, the match just lasted forever, and what I was worried about was, under Traya lead, like if he damages me and I'm debuffed, which I'm not right now, but if he does damage me, he heals himself, and you see he has enough health steal, and my armor is low enough that he actually almost full healed himself anyways off of that AoE. So, the goal here is just to keep him stunned, of course. You want to keep anyone stunned for as long as you can, but, except for maybe a team under the new Finn. I don't really know how that works, but that's beside the point. So, spend minute killing the other two, then spend another full minute trying to kill Sith Empire Trooper. So, I was glad that I took him out because I didn't know what else I had. If you could time this team out, there's pretty sure that I wouldn't be able to chew through him with any of my other squads. So you see, my opponent did run out of gas there against my Geonosian team, and I was able to get the full clear here. Really tough fight. Trying to beat that Darth Revan team was ridiculous. Spending 3 really strong teams, really hard, but I did manage to win, and then for a little bit I was rank number 43. That was after you get all your points for winning, and then eventually you see that I went back down to 196. But overall I was pretty happy with how my ranking was. I was really excited. Like going 12-0 in any season, even in Division 5, is a pretty big deal, and so hopefully I would be able to beat this last guy. And marching into it, my opponent did full clear all of my zones here, and we'll look at my defenses. So they one-shot my Emperor Palpatine team and my Newt team, which kind of surprised me. Usually people don't get that efficient. They one-shot both of the other teams up top, which included Nest, which Nest is difficult to deal with. And then they one-shot all of my teams in the back. So one-shots everywhere. And then my one big break was my opponent failed 3 times on my negotiator, and I was able to at least preserve that. So my opponent did put down some decent squads on defense. They have a developed Karth team, Geonosians, a really strong Jedi Revan team, and a pretty standard Bosk bounty hunter team in the front. So, of course we want to take down the bottom zone first, just so that we know what our opponent has in the back and we can plan accordingly. And I decided to use Commander Luke here against Geonosians because I decided that I'd leave my own General Grievous in reserve, so that I'd be able to use it later again, potentially against like Jedi Revan or something. I didn't really have a great team to be able to tackle Revan, but I figured maybe General Grievous would actually do better. So I was able to take that squad out, and then I'd never really countered a decent Karth team on this account, and I wasn't really sure what to use. And so, initially I was going to use First Order, and then I second guessed a little bit, and you guys can see in a minute what I decided to use. Now, one thing about my opponent one-shotting all my teams, it told me something important. It told me that probably their back zone wasn't full of really good squads. Like, probably they saved all of their really good squads for offense, and, then put down a kind of trip you up defense the same way I'm doing. So, I decided I could afford to spend this Bastila team on Karth. I figured I'd probably win, even though Karth and Mission and Zalbar all have their Zetas, and I only have one Zeta that isn't relevant, which is on Ahsoka. And, the goal here is just, as long as I can kill Karth, it's going to be a worthwhile endeavor. And you can see I already killed him really fast. The problem is, I don't have the Zeta on Bastila. And, I know a lot of people might think that's foolish. I've done amazingly without it, frankly. Up to this point. This is the first time I really missed it, because otherwise, they wouldn't be able to really debuff this team. If I did have that Zeta, I'd have too much tenacity, and then, that all these debuffs are really just hurting me, all these dots. So, at this point, I was pretty sure I was just going to get destroyed. You can see their health and protection are regenerating so much because of all the damage over time, and I did lose. However, they're not operating with a leadership at this point. I took out their lead, so now I can just use, any old team to be able to take them out. And that's basically what I did. I decided to go with the machine gun Leia one more time, and it works pretty well against this team as well. I've done it actually on my main account several times using machine gun Leia to counter Karth. It's pretty fun. It works. It works every time, basically. Sometimes Akbar gets killed, but no one really cares about him anyways. So at this point, I realized that I needed to clear every single character and zone. I didn't need to be perfect because my opponent had failed to clear my back zone, but I had already failed an attack and was therefore going to be less efficient in squads. So I needed to be able to clear, all 3 squad zones and ships. So in the back, there were actually some decently strong squads. There was another First Order team, a decent Night Sister team, but none of them were really super scary, so I was able to plan things out pretty well. The biggest obstacle now was this really, really strong Jedi Revan team. And you guys can see here now the reason why I decided not to use First Order earlier. I wanted to use my Watt with General Grievous, and this is a distilled version actually of my team that I use in Arena for this account. And what Watt does, he gives the weapons tech immediately to Grievous, so that means that he ignores armor and he also denies revives. So Savior, the ability Savior by Jedi Revan is not considered to be a revive. So that I killed Grandmaster Yoda once. He came back from Savior because it wasn't a revive, but now any other kills that I get against this squad, it's going to count as a revive. And things aren't really looking that great. I did kill Grandmaster Yoda, and luckily, Jolie is not going to be able to revive him. It's still pretty scary. Look, you can see my health, almost dead, really close to dead. And I was just hoping maybe I'd be able to kill Revan before I just died myself here. Luckily, most of their damage per second is just gone at this point. So I came real close to losing. 46 banners, that's the lowest you can get in 3v3. Probably less than a few thousand health. Squeaked out the win. So, I did have other characters that could probably finish one of those characters off, but I didn't really want to risk that. It was a pretty close match. That's about as close as you can get. It's not just that you're missing health. Grievous was missing basically all of his health. So, happy to win, obviously. And now we can use Padme against this Bounty Hunters team. It's a decent Bounty Hunters team. It doesn't have the second Zeta on Bosk's taunt, so it's not going to force me to kill Bosk first, which honestly whatever option is fine. These guys chew through Bosk pretty easy, but the real threat on this team is Boba. He's the only one who does enough damage to truly threaten this team. Not that probably at Gear 12 he had enough damage anyways, but it was still pretty good. So 52 banners there, happy enough to get the one shot, and now we can focus on the back 2 zones. And I was wondering what my opponent had taken for defense on ships. Again, home 1, but again, no Millennium Falcon, and I'm just checking out their gear levels. All these characters are Gear 8, and so it looks kind of strong, but my own Millennium Falcon team would probably be able to beat it. So I decided to wait to defer on that one, just to see if there was certain banner levels that I needed to get to be able to beat it. Probably not, though. If I could get all 4 zones cleared, then I would be able to win. So now we have another pretty decent Night Sisters team. It's actually better geared than any of these other ones that we've faced so far, including their Talzin actually has some gear now. So once again, bounty hunters are great. Not only do they deny revives, the other really awesome mechanic about them is the 2 Fets have bounty hunters resolve as long as they don't get killed, and that means that they can ignore the taunt from Zombie. So that's also really nice. Zombie gets really frustrating because you can't actually kill her. She just keeps coming back. But if you can just ignore her taunt, then you can get to the squishy middle pretty quick and easy. That's what I did here. That was probably one of the strongest teams that was going to be an obstacle for me. At this point, I still had my own Jedi Revan, which would have probably been okay to use as cleanup against their Jedi Revan, but you just never know. Like with Jolee and Revan, it's just tough. So I'm glad Grievous, as I've said a million times at this point, I'm glad that Grievous was able to beat them. Now, Jedi Revan against First Order, even though they have some decent gear, is that's a much safer proposition. So here, this isn't even a very well geared First Order team, honestly. They're great for offense. Still, I would use these guys on offense. My opponent has Gear 12 on Kylo Ren Unmasked, which is great. He's tanky and all that, but honestly, this isn't a good defensive team yet. Maybe they've gotten some stops in the past. I don't know. Maybe past opponents haven't had Jedi Revan available to just steamroll them, but as it was, that posed like no threat at all. So now we're going to take another version of Night Sisters that I have, a Saj lead always, because she's my only Zeta lead at this point, and then Zombie to keep my team alive. And then I'm taking old Daka here, not only for stuns, but because she can revive, and that's a really important aspect. Like, you never know. General Grievous is a really scary team, really scary character, but not at this gear level. I'm always intimidated by him anyways, though. He has his unique Zeta, so that means that whenever I kill one of his teammates, then he immediately gets a bonus turn. He dispels all debuffs on himself, and he gets all of his cooldowns are completely refreshed, so that means he can just spam his AoE over and over again. And this match was actually looking a little bit shaky. Newt is frustrating because you kill him, and then he comes back one time, and then, of course, that triggers Grievous taking another turn and doing his AoE, and then you kill Newt again, and it again triggers Grievous's AoE, and eventually I realized I could just kill Grievous because he doesn't have that big of a health pool, and that's where all his damage comes from anyways. So a little more challenging than I'd originally thought or hoped for, but got through it. And now all we have left is this pretty random team full of Jedi tanks. So Old Ben is providing an evade bonus. Kanan can taunt, and he can counter, and then Juhani can also counter, or she can taunt. All 3 of them can taunt, I guess. None of them have any good damage, though, so I felt pretty confident going in here. Like, they did have some decent amount of gear on some of these characters, and it's a pretty decent timeout team. But the one ace up my sleeve is, as long as I can survive, which these guys aren't probably going to be able to kill my guys, if I can survive long enough, First Order Executioner will just ramp up his damage for to such a degree that he'll kill basically anything if he has enough time. And so now we have both of these guys stunned, and Juhani's under stealth, so we can't hit her really except for AoEs, but Old Ben is a good target. He died, buffed Juhani, dispelled those buffs, and got 53. So the back zone didn't prove to be super difficult. And but looking at this, like, my opponent did have a better score. He had more banners than I did, and so I needed to be able to clear this fleet. However, it wasn't a very strong fleet, and you know, Gear 8 pilots are, I don't know, I guess they're fine enough. And if you're not used to your opponents actually being able to clear a Jedi Revan squad with relics on it, then I suppose that you're probably pretty safe just putting garbage in. I did go undersize here just to get a couple more banners if I could, and you know, you can see with the AoE from 5s, it did like almost no damage to my Gear 11 bigs, and you know, after that, I don't know. This wasn't a good team, frankly. Like, this is my own fleet is a top 20 level fleet in Arena, and the team I'm facing is like top 200 or 2,000 or something. Like, it's not really a fleet worth mentioning. So, you know, handled it pretty easy. Probably could have just gone with 3-handed, honestly, but it is what it is. So, did manage the full clear here and got the win. So you can see this is the final map. My opponent didn't somehow have a 4th or 5th fleet to try against my negotiator, and so I ended up with number 74 in Kyber. Pretty decent. After getting feats and everything, I got number 71. I think maybe that's where I ended up. Maybe I ended up in 72. I don't know. So pretty good. Undefeated season. Pretty awesome. I keep saying pretty, so that's not pretty, but I did manage to get some more Zetas for this account, which is always good. And you can see I'm 68 here. I apparently just couldn't make up my mind where to finalize my screenshot, and actually that's not where I ended up either. I was in the lower 70s, so pretty successful season. And then I randomly bought the hyperdrive bundle for my alt just on a total whim, and it's a huge boost, and it also gave me like 300,000 or 400,000 extra GP. So I am now unwillingly going to be competing in Division 4 with my alt in the future, so have that to look forward to. But this has gone on long enough, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and remember that in all things, Xaereth prevails.